Hello there. Today I thought I would talk to you about reading the right book at the right time. Now, I've made no excuse of the fact that my reading is not going how I would like it to go this year, especially this month. I've read barely anything and it's quite depressing, and I have spoken about that before, but I've just had my first 2-star read in a very long time. And I don't know whether that was the read itself or the fact that I've been feeling quite distant from my own reading process. I felt like I really didn't gel with the stories in that short story collection, because it was a short story collection, and I found it very difficult to get along with. It also didn't help in my reading process because it made me not want to pick that book up. But on the back of that, I have gone into one of the few 5-star reads I've had this year, which is The Lonely City by Olivia Lang. And again, I don't know whether this was a case of just reading this at the right time. Obviously, coming off the back of a 2-star read made this all the better for me. I think it really highlighted how good this was. I actually picked this up partly, I'm going to be honest, because she's called Olivia and I don't often see writers called Olivia, but also because I had heard a little bit about it. This is a non-fiction in which Olivia Lang, through her own experience and also through the gaze of different artists, she looks at the subject of loneliness and what it means to each of us, and also how we try to combat our own loneliness. It's absolutely amazing. So there's a lot of artists in here that I hadn't heard of. She does look a lot at Andy Warhol, and he's sort of the focus for it, because obviously he's the most well-known artist that she talks about, but she also speaks about various different photographers. She talks about a photographer who I was really fascinated with when I was in college called Nan Goldin, and she talks about her photographs and the process behind them. And basically in every instance she looks at artists that somehow deal with loneliness and try to overcome loneliness almost through the art that they create. And she also looks at the psychology of loneliness and the effect that it has in a wider sense. So the fact that we don't only impose our own loneliness, but society also almost reinforces that idea of loneliness by shunning somebody who they consider other, or somebody who has difficulty with socialising or connecting with other people. And it looks at, as I say, the way that people who experience that have tried to connect to the world outside. It also looks at the AIDS epidemic in New York, which affected and killed a lot of the artists she talks about in this book. It also looks a lot at gender and about being gay or being trans or being different in any real way, or being part of a excluded group in society. I really enjoyed the part about the AIDS epidemic in here. It was difficult to read, obviously it was, but it's really interesting to look at how that was used to almost make this marginalised group even more marginalised, and to sort of remove them. And even the people within that group, it looks at a few of Andy Warhol's diary entries, for example, where even he, who was part of that minority group, had started avoiding friends or avoiding touching his friends, because in the very early days it wasn't known what AIDS was or how it was transmitted. So people developed a real fear of even being in the presence of people who had AIDS, or even hugging them. It was thought that just breathing the same air that they breathed could give you this disease. And the government very much got behind that to exclude these people who really needed help. They weren't getting the help that they needed medically or mentally. They were being completely shunned. And it kind of reminds me, in a very strange and removed way, of the fact that we still do that to marginalised groups today. Look at the way we treat refugees and the way we kind of shun them to the side, and the general consensus in the news and things is that they are a nuisance, that they are crime makers. Even with the whole terrorist rhetoric about the fact that people automatically assume that a terrorist act has been committed by a Muslim person, because that is what the news and the government want you to think. So automatically refugees and Muslims are shunned to the side. So it's a rhetoric that keeps coming back even now, and it was really interesting to read about that in here. And generally I just really enjoyed the process of reading this. As a person who has struggled to communicate with other people throughout my life, I think it just spoke to me in a really intense way and really got under my skin, and it's one that I will not be forgetting in the near distant future. But again, going back to the whole idea of reading the right book at the right time, part of me kind of thinks that this book was highlighted for me because I had just read a 2-star read. Also because I read it on a weekend where I was predominantly alone, so I think the experience of reading it has kind of highlighted the whole aspect of the book, and it's kind of left me feeling a bit shaken. in the best way. And I think it also, while it speaks about loneliness, it's kind of this complete coming together. It kind of makes it so that you don't feel as alone, because you can understand that other people have experienced this experience of loneliness. And it's like that old saying, isn't it, that we are all alone but at least we are together in that. I would very much recommend giving this a go. It put me in mind a little bit of Just Kids by Patti Smith, but I think I actually preferred this book, and that's a big say. I loved Just Kids. I have read it twice now and it was just a phenomenal read both times. But it has the same themes, maybe because it's set in New York. Obviously it's a little bit later on, it's not in the Patti Smith heyday where there was a lot of big names living in the same hotel, but Olivia Lang actually lives in that hotel for a brief period of this. She mentions Robert Mapplethorpe in here with regards to the AIDS epidemic, and also just in general the idea of trying to find your place in the world through creativity and through the art around you. And yeah, it was very reminiscent of Just Kids. So if you're a fan of that, I would definitely recommend this. So let me know down below what you think. Do you find that the time in which you read a book has a major effect on your enjoyment of that book, or do you think your reading is a little bit more objective? It'll be interesting to hear, and I will see you next time. Bye!